There's a child in almost every classroom who sits near the edge, not causing trouble, not raising their hand, not making noise. They watch, they absorb, they take in things that other children don't even notice. The shift in a teacher's tone, the way a friend's laugh changes when something hurts behind it. The tension between two people who smile at each other but don't mean it. This child doesn't just observe the world. They feel it, every layer of it. And somewhere along the way, they learn that feeling this much is not welcome. So they do the only thing a child knows how to do. They go quiet. But here's what most people never understand about the quiet kid. The silence was never emptiness. It was overflow. They didn't go quiet because they had nothing to say. They went quiet because they had too much to say, and no one around them seemed equipped to hear it. They felt the weight of a room before anyone spoke. They carried emotions that weren't even theirs. And when they tried to express what they were feeling, the world responded with confusion, or worse, dismissal. Too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. So they learned the lesson early. Feeling deeply is a problem, and problems are better kept to yourself. But that lesson, as small and ordinary as it seemed, quietly rewired everything. Because when a child learns to suppress what they feel, they don't stop feeling. They just stop showing. The emotions don't go away. They go underground. Psychologists describe this as emotional hyperpermeability. It means the child's emotional boundaries are thinner than most. They absorb the moods, tensions, and unspoken pain of the people around them as if those feelings were their own. Imagine walking through life with no emotional skin. Every glance, every silence, every shift in energy lands directly on your nervous system with nothing to soften it. That's what it feels like to be a child who feels too deeply. Not a choice, not a phase, a neurological reality. Research by psychologist Elaine Aron on sensory processing sensitivity shows that roughly 15 to 20% of children are born with nervous systems that process stimuli more deeply than average. These children don't just hear a raised voice, they feel it in their chest. They don't just witness an argument, they absorb its emotional residue for hours, sometimes days. Their brains are wired to notice subtlety, to detect threat, to process meaning at a level most people never reach. And in a world that rewards loudness, speed, and emotional efficiency, that depth becomes a burden they carry alone. There's also a layer most people overlook entirely. The quiet kid doesn't just feel the world more deeply, they feel themselves more deeply. Every mistake becomes a wound. Every rejection becomes a verdict. A single unkind word from a classmate doesn't just sting for an afternoon. It replays for weeks. Psychologists call this depth of processing. The brain doesn't just register an event. It analyzes it, connects it to past experiences, searches for meaning, and stores it with full emotional weight. So while other children move on from a bad day in hours, this child is still sitting with it quietly, turning it over and over in their mind, trying to understand not just what happened, but what it means about who they are. And that's where the real damage begins. Not from the outside, from the inside. Because when you process every experience that deeply, you begin to build a story about yourself. A story that says, I am too much. I don't fit. Something about me is wrong. And that story, written in childhood, becomes the operating system for adulthood. Think about what this does to a child over time. They learn to scan every room for emotional danger before they enter it. They learn to read faces the way other children read books. They learn to adjust their energy, their words, their entire presence based on what the people around them seem to need, not because anyone asked them to, because their nervous system decided it was necessary for survival. This is what psychologists call hypervigilance, a state of constant emotional alertness that looks like shyness from the outside but is actually exhaustion from the inside. The quiet kid isn't disengaged. They are working harder than anyone in the room. They are processing every micro-expression, every tone shift, every unspoken feeling. And they are doing it all silently because they learned long ago that no one wants to hear about what they see. There's another pattern that forms during this time, one that shapes how they relate to others for the rest of their lives. The quiet kid begins to believe that their role in any group is to observe, never to lead. Not because they lack ability, because every time they tried to step forward, the response was indifference. A raised hand ignored, a thought dismissed as overthinking, a feeling labeled as dramatic. And each of those small moments didn't just sting. They accumulated, like drops of water carving a river through stone. Slowly, invisibly, they carved a belief into this child's identity. Your presence is optional. Your absence would go unnoticed. And so the quiet kid stops trying to be seen, not because they don't want connection, but because the cost of reaching for it and being turned away feels worse than never reaching at all. Psychologists call this anticipatory withdrawal. The nervous system learns to predict rejection and pulls back before it happens. It's not shyness, it's self-preservation dressed in silence. And here's where something else develops quietly. The quiet kid becomes the caretaker. Not because they want to, because they can't help it. When you feel everyone's pain as if it were your own, you instinctively move towards soothing it. You become the friend who always listens, but never shares. The one who carries everyone else's weight while pretending yours doesn't exist. You learn that your value lies in what you absorb, not in what you express. And slowly, invisibly, you begin to disappear inside your own usefulness. Not because you chose it, because it was the only role that made your sensitivity feel like it had a purpose instead of being a flaw. But here's the part that almost nobody talks about. Beneath the quietness, beneath the caretaking, beneath the years of absorbing everything and expressing nothing, there is a loneliness so deep it doesn't even feel like loneliness anymore. It feels like identity. The quiet kid grows up believing that being alone with their feelings is just who they are. They don't recognize it as isolation because it's all they've ever known. They mistake solitude for personality. They mistake emotional suppression for strength. And the saddest part is that the people around them often reinforce this. They're told they're mature for their age. They're praised for being easy, low maintenance, no trouble at all. But what no one realizes is that behind that ease is a child who learned to carry everything quietly because the one time they didn't, someone made them feel like their feelings were a burden. And there is a particular kind of grief that lives inside this person. Not the grief of something that was taken away, but the grief of something that was never given. The grief of never being asked, "How are you?" and having someone actually wait for the real answer. The grief of watching other children cry freely and be held while you taught yourself to cry only in bathrooms, only in silence, only when no one could see. The grief of having an entire ocean inside you and being told your whole life that you were a puddle. They carry this grief into adulthood without knowing its name. They feel it when they're surrounded by friends, but still somehow alone. They feel it when someone asks what's wrong and they say nothing, not because nothing is wrong, but because they've never been taught that someone could hold the real answer. And that one moment, that single dismissal, taught them a lesson they never unlearned. My emotions are too much for people, so I will carry them alone. That belief follows them into every friendship, every relationship, every room they enter as an adult. They sit with their pain in silence, not because they are strong, because they are afraid that if they let it out, it will be too much for the world, just like it was too much for the people who were supposed to hold it first. But here's the truth that changes everything. The depth that made them struggle is the same depth that makes them extraordinary. A child who felt everything too deeply didn't just survive. They developed a level of emotional intelligence that most people spend a lifetime trying to learn. They notice what others miss. They understand what others can't articulate. They feel the room before anyone speaks, and they carry a kind of wisdom that doesn't come from books. It comes from years of sitting quietly with human complexity. Their sensitivity was never the flaw. The environment that couldn't hold it was the flaw. And that distinction matters more than they will ever know. Because once they see that, the entire story shifts. They stop trying to feel less and start learning to protect what they feel. Not by building walls, but by choosing doors. Choosing who gets access to their inner world. Choosing which emotions to carry and which to gently set down. Permission to feel without apologizing for the depth of it. Permission to exist without shrinking. Psychologists call this emotional regulation, not suppression, not numbing, but the quiet, deliberate practice of honoring your own depth without drowning in it. And it starts with something surprisingly simple. Believing, maybe for the first time, that what you feel is not a burden. It is information. It is intelligence. It is the very thing that allows you to connect with life at a level most people will never reach. And maybe that's the quiet truth about the child who felt everything too deeply. They were never too much. They were placed in rooms that were too small. Rooms that couldn't hold what they carried. Rooms that asked them to shrink when they were built to feel. And now, slowly, they are finding rooms that fit. Not loud rooms, not crowded rooms, but honest ones. Safe ones. Rooms where their depth is not a disruption, but a gift. Where their silence is not emptiness, but presence. Where being sensitive doesn't mean being broken. It means being awake in a world that taught them to sleep. Because the quiet kid who felt everything too deeply didn't just survive the noise. They learned to hear what the noise was hiding. And that, in the end, is not a wound. It is a kind of seeing that the world desperately needs. Quiet, steady, and deeply, impossibly alive.